There was a storm in Texas a few winters back that knocked the power out for nearly a week across half the state. Millions of people sat in freezing houses watching everything in their refrigerators and freezers die in front of them. Meat turning gray, milk going sour, leftovers growing fuzz. Families throwing away $200, $300 worth of food because the electricity stopped and they had no other way to keep it. Some people dragged coolers out to their front porches and packed them with snow, trying to save what they could. Others drove for hours looking for a store that still had power and still had anything on the shelves. And every one of them, every single one, was living through something that my people solved thousands of years ago and never had to think about again. My name is Frank Red Hawk. I grew up on the reservation out in the high desert. And I want to show you 4 methods today that my people used to store food for months, sometimes years, with no refrigerator, no freezer, no electricity, and no chemicals. Not one of these methods requires anything you cannot find at a grocery store or in your own backyard. Not one of them requires power. Not one of them stops working because a storm knocked down a line or a compressor burned out. I made a video a while back on one of these methods, pemmican, and I went deep on it. Today I'm going to show you the full picture, all 4 systems, how they work, how my people use them together, and why the modern food industry would rather you never heard of any of them. Because every one of these methods puts you one step further away from needing their cold chain, their packaging, their preservatives, their sell-by dates, and their grocery store. And a customer who can feed himself through a winter without setting foot in a store is a customer they have lost. Stay with me. Let me start with the thing all 4 methods have in common, because once you understand this one idea, you will understand all of them. Food does not spoil on its own. It does not go bad because time passes. If you could freeze time around a piece of fresh meat, it would look exactly the same 1,000 years from now as it does today. What spoils food is life. Tiny living organisms, bacteria, mold, yeasts, that land on the surface and start consuming it. They eat the food, they multiply, they produce the slime, the smell, the toxins. That is spoilage. Living things eating your food before you do. And those living things need specific conditions to grow. They need moisture, they need oxygen, they need warmth. Take away any one of those 3 and the organisms slow down. Take away 2 and they nearly stop. Take away all 3 and your food sits unchanged for months or years. That is the entire science of food preservation in 3 words. Remove the conditions. Every method I am about to show you attacks one or more of those 3 conditions. Drying removes moisture. Smoking removes moisture and adds a chemical barrier. Fat sealing removes oxygen. Earth storage removes warmth. My people did not know the word bacteria. They did not need to. They watched what happened and they built 4 systems around what they saw. Method 1. Drying. This is the oldest and simplest, and it is the foundation that everything else builds on. My people dried everything: meat, fish, corn, berries, squash, herbs, roots, anything that came in heavy during the good season and needed to last through the lean season got dried. The principle is absolute. Bacteria need water to live. Remove the water and bacteria cannot grow. Food that has had the moisture taken out of it does not rot. It cannot. There is nothing left in it for the organisms to use. That is why a cracker lasts in your pantry for months, but a piece of bread goes moldy in a week. The cracker is dry, the bread is not. You already know how to dry meat because I showed you in the pemmican video. Thin strips, cut with the grain, dried in the sun or in the oven at the lowest setting until they snap like a cracker. Bone dry all the way through. That is jerky, and it has been the most important survival food on this continent for as long as anyone can remember. A pound of fresh meat becomes a few ounces of jerky that fits in your pocket and lasts for months at room temperature, with no wrapping, no refrigeration, no special container. But my people dried far more than meat. They sliced squash and pumpkin into thin rings and hung them on cords strung between poles in the sun. Dried squash lasts all winter, and you rehydrate it in a pot of boiling water when you are ready to eat it, and it tastes nearly as good as fresh. They dried berries, choke cherries, service berries, blueberries, spread on flat rocks or woven mats in the sun until they were hard like little pebbles. Those dried berries went into pemmican, into stews, into everything. They were the vitamins that got families through the months when nothing grew. They dried corn on the cob and then scraped the kernels off and stored them in hide bags. Dried corn kept for years. You soak it overnight and cook it the next day, and it feeds a family. They dried fish whole, split open and hung in the smoke and the wind until it was stiff as a board. Dried fish was currency on this continent. It was traded across hundreds of miles. Here's what you can do right now. Anything you have too much of in your garden or your kitchen, slice it thin and dry it. A cheap food dehydrator costs about $40 and will last you decades. Your oven on its lowest setting with the door propped open does the same thing. Even a window screen laid flat on two sawhorses in full sun will dry herbs, fruit, peppers, tomatoes. Once they are bone dry, store them in a glass jar with a tight lid. No moisture gets in, no bacteria can grow. You have just preserved food that would have rotted in a week and turned it into food that lasts months or years, for free. Method 2. Smoking. Drying removes the moisture. Smoking does that and adds a second layer of protection that makes the food last even longer and gives it a flavor that people have been craving for thousands of years. When wood burns slowly and smokes rather than flames, the smoke that rises carries chemical compounds: phenols, formaldehyde, acetic acid. You do not need to know the names. What you need to know is that those compounds land on the surface of the food hanging in the smoke, and they do two things. They kill bacteria on contact, and they form a thin chemical coating on the surface that continues to prevent bacteria from growing after the smoking is done. It is a natural preservative applied by fire and air. My people built smoking racks everywhere, simple structures. 4 poles in the ground, cross pieces between them, a low fire underneath burning slow with green wood or damp chips to keep the smoke heavy and the flame low. You do not want heat. You do not want fire cooking the food. You want smoke flowing over it for hours, sometimes days, drying it slowly while coating it in those protective compounds. Fish was the food most commonly smoked because fish spoils fastest. Fresh salmon pulled from the river in the morning will start to turn by nightfall. But salmon hung in smoke for 2 to 3 days becomes a hard, dense, preserved food that lasts for months. Smoked fish was the staple food of every coastal and river nation on this continent. It was stored in bundles, packed in baskets, stacked in storehouses. It fed villages through entire winters. Meat was smoked the same way. Venison, elk, buffalo, cut into strips or chunks and hung over the smoking fire until it was dark on the outside and dry through the middle. Smoked meat lasts longer than sun-dried jerky because the smoke compounds add that extra barrier. You can smoke food at home with nothing more than a metal trash can, a small electric hot plate, and a bag of wood chips from the hardware store. There are 100 videos showing you how to build a simple cold smoker for under $30, or you can buy a basic smoker for about $50 to $80 at any outdoor store. The point is not the equipment. The point is the principle. Smoke dries the food, coats it, and preserves it, and people have been doing it with nothing but sticks and fire since the beginning. Method 3. Fat sealing. This is the method I covered in the pemmican video, so I will keep it short here, but I want you to understand where it fits in the system because it is the method that takes preserved food from lasting months to lasting years. You already know the idea. Dried meat, ground to a powder, mixed with an equal part of warm, rendered tallow. The fat fills every air pocket. It coats every fiber of the dried meat. When it cools and hardens, the food is sealed inside a block of solid fat with no moisture and no oxygen able to reach it. That is pemmican, and it is the most energy-dense, longest-lasting preserved food ever created. 1 to 2 years minimum at room temperature, 5 years or more in cool conditions. Some documented cases of 10 years. But fat sealing works beyond pemmican. My people packed cooked meat into clay pots or hide containers and poured a thick layer of rendered fat over the top. The fat hardened into a lid, an airtight, natural lid that sealed the food from the air. This is the same principle the French use in their confit, duck legs cooked and stored under a layer of duck fat. The English did the same thing with potted meat. It is an ancient and universal preservation method, and it works because fat does not spoil the way protein does, and once it hardens over the food, no oxygen or bacteria can get through. You can do this with anything you cook. Make a big batch of stew, a pot of beans, a roast. Put the leftovers in a jar. Pour a half-inch of melted tallow or lard over the top. Let it cool and harden. That food will keep for weeks in a cool pantry, not days. The fat seal does the work the refrigerator normally does, except it does not need electricity, and it does not stop working when the power goes out. Method 4. Earth storage. This is the method for food you do not want to dry or smoke or seal. Fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, eggs, cheese, anything you want to keep cold without a machine. Here's the fact that changes everything. The temperature of the ground about 3 to 4 feet below the surface stays around 50 to 55 degrees year-round. It does not matter if it is 100 degrees in July or 10 degrees in January. Down in the earth, the temperature holds steady because the mass of the soil insulates it from the air above. My people knew this. Every culture that has ever farmed knew this, and they used it. My people dug cache pits, holes in the ground lined with grass or bark or hide, deep enough that the food stored inside sat below the frost line and below the summer heat. Root vegetables, corn, dried goods, sealed pots of fat, even fresh meat in the cold months went into these pits, covered with layers of grass and earth, and stayed cool and protected for weeks or months. It was a refrigerator dug with a stick. The European settlers called them root cellars, and they built them everywhere across this country for the same reason. A room dug into a hillside or underground, insulated by the earth, staying cool in summer and above freezing in winter. Every farm had one. Every family used one, and they fell out of use for one reason only. The electric refrigerator arrived in the 1930s, and people forgot that the ground had been doing the same job for free since the beginning of agriculture. You do not need to dig a root cellar to use this principle. A simple buried container will do the same thing on a smaller scale. Take a large plastic storage bin or an old cooler with a lid. Dig a hole in a shady spot in your yard deep enough to set the container in with the lid at ground level. Put your root vegetables in it: potatoes, carrots, turnips, onions, beets, apples. Cover it with the lid and pile some straw or leaves on top for extra insulation. The earth around it holds the temperature steady, no power required. In hot climates, this keeps food 20 to 30 degrees cooler than the air above. In cold climates, it keeps food from freezing when the air is well below zero. The earth is the oldest temperature regulator there is, and it is sitting right under your feet, free, waiting to be used. Now let me be honest with you. None of these methods give you the convenience of a refrigerator. You cannot dry a piece of chicken at 3 in the afternoon and eat it at 6. These methods require planning. They require a day of work up front, drying, smoking, rendering, digging, that saves you weeks or months of food on the back end. My people did this work when the food was abundant, so that when the food was scarce, they did not worry. That is the trade, a day of effort for a season of security. Also, not every food works with every method. Dairy is hard to preserve without cold. Leafy greens do not dry well. Some fruits turn bitter when smoked. Know the strengths of each method and match them to the food you have. Meat and fish respond to all four. Root vegetables are best in earth storage. Fruits and corn are best dried. Cooked dishes are best fat-sealed. Use the right tool for the right food, and the system works. Here is the truth that sits underneath all of this. The modern food system has spent 80 years teaching you that preservation requires their equipment, their chemicals, their cold chain, their plastic packaging, their stamped expiration dates. Every piece of that system costs you money. The refrigerator, the electricity to run it, the freezer, the vacuum sealer and its bags, the preservatives in the packaged food, the gas to drive to the grocery store every week because nothing in your kitchen lasts more than a few days without their machines running. My people stored enough food in the fall to eat through an entire winter with no store, no machine, no power, no packaging. Dried meat hung in bundles from the ceiling. Smoked fish stacked in baskets. Pemmican packed in rawhide cases. Root vegetables buried in the earth. The whole family fed for months on food preserved with nothing but sun, smoke, fat, and the ground beneath them. That is not primitive. That is independence. And it is the one thing the grocery industry, the appliance industry, and the utility company cannot sell you. Because once you have it, you do not need them. Here is what I want you to try. This week, slice one fruit or one vegetable thin and dry it. Use the oven, use a dehydrator, use a screen in the sun. Just try it once and store it in a jar and check it in a month. It will be exactly as you left it. Next time you cook a roast or a stew, put the leftovers in a jar and pour a layer of melted fat over the top. Let it seal. Set it in the pantry. Check it in 2 weeks. Still good. If you have a backyard, dig a hole, bury a container. Put some potatoes and carrots in it. Check them in a month. Cool and crisp. Small experiments. Old knowledge. No installation, no bill. Food that lasts because you understand why food spoils and you took the conditions away. Tell me in the comments which method you are going to try first. Drying, smoking, fat sealing, or earth storage. I want to hear which one fits your life, and I want to hear what you preserve first. Because the people who come back and tell me what happened are the whole reason I keep doing this. I read every one of these, every single one. Next time I am going to show you the native smoke blend that clears every bug out of your house for weeks. Mosquitoes, flies, ants, spiders, all of them gone. A handful of dried plants in a clay dish that my grandmother burned on the porch every summer evening. It costs nothing. It takes 10 minutes, and it smells like the best thing you have ever breathed. Until then, dry the meat, smoke the fish, seal the jar, and bury the roots. The people who lived on this land for thousands of years before the refrigerator was invented never lost a meal to a power outage. And that knowledge still works.